something that was tattered. The idea would be someone who didn't own any other clothes. This is what they owned. And they wore it every day, so they didn't wash it, because it's a little uncomfortable to go around without clothes on. They didn't wash it, and it was torn and tattered, and it smelt. It would be just like someone we would meet who's homeless, who lives in their clothes, and you get in close proximity, and it's a little bit offensive. Now, don't tell me those of us who have been to church in the park, for instance, and have walked around some of the homeless people, haven't felt a little uncomfortable. And James is painting a vivid contrast. Here is a very wealthy, powerful man of means. Here's a homeless man who has nothing to offer and in need of much. He says, look how you treat these. He comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes, and here's how he demonstrates special attention. Special attention just means ooh and ah, reverence, falling all over yourself. He says, if you say to him, here's a good seat for you. Now again, most of you aren't Jewish. That doesn't have a lot of significance for you. But we read even in Matthew chapter 23 that Jesus rebuked those who were always fighting for the right seat around the table. You remember that story? And Jesus was criticizing him. He said, don't go for the best seats. Let the host assign you a seat. And basically he was getting on to these people for trying to fight over the seat of honor and status. And so what these people are doing, they see someone with means, they see someone that they really want to know, that they want to be a part of their congregation. Please join our church, help us out, we need you, we need your money, we need your power and influence. Please take the best seat in the house. Now, the contrast, here it is again. But say to the poor man, you stand there, or even worse, sit on the floor by my feet. And here's another Jewish expression we wouldn't know. In Psalm 110, you remember what the prophecy of the Messiah? Prophecy of the Messiah is that God the Father will elevate the Messiah till all his enemies are his footstool. It was a place of degradation. It was something that was very insulting, submissive, and allow someone to come, oh, you can sit here by my feet. It was a very derogatory term. James is painting these vivid contrasts, and he goes on. The end of verse 4. Have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Now he's attacking their conscience. Obviously he's doing a specific scenario. Many commentators believe that this had been reported back to James, that this was happening, that James is using a specific illustration, which would be very pointed. I mean, can you imagine you were the guy that said that and you're listening to it like, oh my goodness. So this is very vivid in their minds, and he's attacking their conscience, that where it says, have you not? In the original language, there's a little phrase there, that ooh, which it's an implied, it's more of an accusation than a question. And he's really attacking their conscience. Now the word discriminated there is a very interesting word. And by the way, when we're comparing this to Jesus, the glorious one, and number one. And you know how Jesus made value judgments on people? Of course, he saw their heart, but more than that, he saw their potential. You know that? When Jesus was at a church setting, it was a synagogue, but people were putting money in, and he noticed the widow coming in that just had a few pennies, but it was all she had, and Jesus makes a big deal out of this lady just giving pennies. And when he sees Simon, the rough, rugged fisherman with a loose mouth, and he sees him, I'm not calling you Simon anymore, I'm calling you Peter, because you're going to be the rock. And you're going to be part of this movement that I'm about to launch. When he sees Matthew, the tax collector that nobody likes, and he calls him out and says, follow me. When the woman at the well comes, who's known for her loose living, she's had multiple husbands, which is a very derogatory sign back in the day. And not only that, she was living with someone which was especially looked down upon as terms of prostitution. And he looked at her and saw in her an evangelist who would eventually turn the whole town towards Jesus. I mean, Jesus sees potential. That's what he sees in people. And James is attacking that conscience, and he says, you've become discriminatory. Now that word there is very rich. We have a meaning for it. In Bible terms, it could also be translated divided. You've been divided among yourselves. You've become confused in even what you say you believe. I'm going to show you just a few verses here. I'll put them on the screen behind you. I'll read them through. Let me just give you some descriptions of how God judges people and how God looks upon people and their face value. We'll walk through the Old Testament and New. Deuteronomy 10, 17 and 18. For the Lord your God shows no partiality, and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the alien, giving him food and clothing. 1 Samuel 16:7, probably one of the more notable references of God's view on people and their appearances. The Lord does not look at the things man looks at, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Luke 4:18, here's Jesus describing himself. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed. That's Jesus' mission statement. Mark 12:14, this is from his enemies. This is what his enemies say about him. Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by men, because you pay no attention to who they are. These are these enemies addressing that to him. And here's Paul, the apostle, looking back in Romans 2:11. For God does not show favoritism. James asks you and asks me, this is the God you say you serve? This is the God that you claim to follow? This is the God that you worship and sing about, yet your character is completely and diametrically opposed to everything that God presents himself to be, all throughout the Bible. James says, have you not discriminated? You're divided. James has a very colorful term for this kind of person. He introduces it back in chapter 1 and verse 8. He says, you're double-minded. You're two-faced. You say one thing and you live another. You're ruining your testimony. Your spirituality is weak. You're immature. Don't be that way. Don't discriminate amongst yourself. He says you make yourselves to be evil judges. Now again, he's addressing poor people. He's not talking to